She was 11 years old, barefoot, shivering in the November wind, no coat, no food in her belly for 2 days, no family left in this world. And when she finally stopped walking, she stood at the gate of a man who had given up on everything. Ethan Holloway had buried his wife. His son had walked away 5 years ago and never looked back. He was just waiting to die. But this little girl did not ask him for charity. She did not beg for food or shelter. She looked him straight in the eye and said 7 words that would change both their lives forever. "Sir, can you give me work?" He should have turned her away. He wanted to. But something in those steady gray eyes stopped him cold. What happened next will break your heart and put it back together again. A story of 2 broken souls who found each other when the world had given up on them both. Stay until the end, I promise you. The ending is worth every moment. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never expected. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply opening the door when they knock. This story reminds us that family is not always about blood. It is about who shows up, who stays, and who fights for you when no one else will. It is for everyone who has ever felt unwanted and everyone who has ever been given a second chance. If this story moved you, leave a comment telling me what part touched your heart the most. Hit that like button if you believe broken people can heal each other. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. And share it with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to find where you belong. Now let us begin. That gate had been busted for 3 years. Ethan stood on his sagging porch, a coffee cup in his rough hand, just staring at it. The old wood was splintered, held together with nothing but rusty wire. A cold wind blew across the Nebraska prairie, rattling the dry corn stalks he had never bothered to bring in. The sky was low and gray, pressing down on the whole world. At 53 years old, Ethan felt every bit of his age in his aching bones, and the silence that had become his only friend. He sure was not expecting company. So, when a small figure appeared at the end of his dirt road, his first feeling was annoyance. Probably someone lost, or worse, a preacher coming to sell him salvation from a book. He set his cup down and waited, squinting. As the figure got closer, he saw it was not a man, but a child. A knot tightened in his chest. He grabbed the porch post, his knuckles turning white. Kids did not come out this way. There was nothing for miles but failing farms and folks the world left behind. The closest town, Miller's Crossing, was 8 miles away and hardly a town at all. The girl stopped right at his gate. She was so thin a strong gust might carry her off. Her little dress was pale blue, torn and not nearly warm enough. She had no coat and no shoes. Her feet were caked with dirt and what looked like dried blood. Ethan's stomach clenched. She stood there a long moment, then lifted her head and looked him square in the eye. "Sir," she called out, her voice small but steady. "Can you give me work?" Ethan was stunned. He had expected tears or begging, but not this. "What?" His voice came out like grinding gears, rough from not being used. The girl did not even flinch. "I can work," she repeated. "I can cook and clean. I can mend things. I do not eat much, and I do not need paying." She swallowed hard. "Just a roof and some work." Ethan's jaw went tight. He did not want this trouble. He had worked hard to build a life with no attachments, nothing that could hurt him anymore. And here was this little girl asking him to care. "Where is your family?" he asked. Her eyes fell to the ground. "Gone." He watched her shiver in the wind, wrapping her arms around her tiny frame. He knew he should send her on her way, but his feet felt nailed to the porch. "How old are you?" 11. "And you walked all the way here?" "Yes, sir." "From where?" She paused. "Everywhere." Ethan let out a rough sigh and looked down the empty road. He saw nothing but wind and dust. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Clara," Clara Wells. He repeated the name. I do not need any help. Her chin lifted just a bit. Everyone needs help, sir. The simple truth of her words hit him with an ache he had not felt in years. It was the kind of hurt that comes right before you break, and Ethan had sworn he would never break again. He turned away. There is a church in town. Go there. I already tried, she said, her voice flat. They said they would pray for me. Ethan gave a bitter smile. Of course they did. He was trapped between wanting to run inside and an old feeling his late wife Anna used to call his stubborn conscience. He could almost hear Anna's voice, telling him he was a better man than this. But he knew she was wrong. He had proven it 5 years ago when his son Daniel walked away for good. He proved it again when Anna got sick, and he could not do a thing to save her. And yet here was Clara Wells, asking not for a handout, but for a purpose. All right, he heard himself say. Her head shot up. Come on then, he said, his voice still gruff. You can stay the night. We will figure the rest out in the morning. For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed her face, delicate as a moth's wing. She pushed the broken gate open and walked toward him. As she came up the steps, he saw the old yellowing bruises on her arms and a scabbed-over cut on her brow. Her feet were raw and blistered. She smelled of dust and hunger. Thank you, sir, she said, impossibly brave. Ethan just grunted and opened the door. Do not thank me yet. The inside of the house was just like the outside, neglected and cold. Dirty dishes were piled on the table. The stove was dark. A bottle of whiskey sat by his chair. Clara stood in the doorway, taking it all in with those steady gray eyes of hers. Sit, Ethan told her, pointing to a chair. She sat down carefully as he worked to get a fire going in the stove. He did not have much food, just some dried beans, a little bread, and some salted pork. He felt clumsy under her gaze. When was the last time you ate? He asked, not looking at her. 2 days ago. His hand stopped for a second. 2 days. He pushed on, scooping a bowl of hot beans and setting it in front of her. Eat slow, he warned. Clara nodded, her hands shaking as she picked up the spoon. As she ate, silent tears just rolled down her face. Ethan had to look away, a lump forming in his throat. He poured himself some coffee and sat in the quiet, listening to the wind outside. The little stove crackled. As Clara ate, Ethan saw the color slowly return to her cheeks. When she was done, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan grunted. You said you can work? Yes, sir, anything. A new steel entered her voice. I have cooked and cleaned for my mama since I was 7. I can mend, garden, anything. I am strong. Where is your mama now? Clara's face became very still. She died last spring. And your father? Never knew him. The sad picture started to become clear. He learned she had an aunt in Omaha who also did not want her. The plain way she said it, like being unwanted, was normal, made Ethan's chest ache. Why come here? He asked. Why my farm? She looked at her small hands. I saw your gate. It's busted, but still holding on. I figured you'd know. Ethan's brow furrowed. Know what? Her gaze met his, and he saw a wisdom well beyond her 11 years. What it feels like to hold on when everything else is gone. The truth of it struck him hard. He shoved his chair back, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. Back room's free, he said, his voice strained. Bed's in there, it's clean. Clara stood up slow, as if afraid he might change his mind. Thank you, sir. Do not call me sir. She looked confused. What do I call you? Ethan, he said, turning away from her. Just Ethan. The back room belonged to Daniel, his son. Ethan had not been inside since Daniel, then a fiery 22, had stormed out yelling words that haunted him still. You love this dirt more than you ever loved me. The truck engine had roared, and a slammed door was the only goodbye. For 5 long years, Ethan waited for his son's return, but that hope had died. He opened the room's door now, stirring up dust in the fading light. The bed was made, a quilt his wife Anna had stitched folded at its end. Clara stepped past him, her eyes taking it all in. "It is perfect," she breathed. Ethan just grunted. "It is a room." "It is the best I have had in a long while," she replied. He had no answer for that. He left her, shutting the door gently, and went back to the kitchen. The fire was low, but he ignored it, grabbing the whiskey bottle instead. He sank into his chair, staring at the embers, telling himself she was only staying the one night. But even as the house grew dark, Ethan Holloway knew that was a lie. Clara woke in the quiet before sunrise, warm and safe for the first time in ages. Her body ached, but the memory of the sad-eyed man Ethan brought a sliver of hope. She heard him moving about and followed the smell of coffee and bacon into the kitchen. He was at the stove, his back to her. "You are up with the sun," he said without turning. "Yes, sir." "Ethan," she corrected herself, "I am used to it." "Sit," he commanded. He placed a full plate of eggs, bacon, and a biscuit in front of her, along with a cup of milk. They ate without a word. Clara savored each bite, fighting back tears of gratitude. When they were done, Ethan looked her square in the eye. "You still aim to work for your keep?" "Yes." "All right. 1 week. You work, you eat, you sleep here. We will see after that." A fragile hope bloomed in her heart. "I will not disappoint you." "See that you do not," he said, grabbing his coat. "Start with this kitchen. I will be out in the barn." The door shut, leaving her in a quiet, determined silence. She had 1 week. By lunchtime, the kitchen already looked like a different place, scrubbed clean from top to bottom. She even found a mending basket and began fixing his worn-out shirts. When Ethan came in for his midday meal, he stopped cold in the doorway. "You did all this?" he asked, looking around at the clean, orderly room. "Is it okay?" she asked, looking up from her needlework. He stared for a long moment. "It is fine," he finally said, his voice thick with unspoken feelings. Later, while cleaning the main room, she found a picture on the mantelpiece of a kind-eyed woman and a serious young man. "That is Anna," Ethan's voice came from behind her, making her jump. "My wife, passed on 3 years back." He gently took the frame from her. "And that is Daniel, my boy. Where is he now?" "Do not know," Ethan said, his jaw tight as he set the picture down. "Have not seen him in 5 years. The rigid set of his shoulders told Clara not to ask any more questions. A quiet routine settled in after that. He worked the farm, and she brought the house back to life. They hardly spoke, but a comfortable silence grew between them, born from shared work and a sense of purpose. Then, on the 4th day, Clara discovered a small wooden box in a kitchen cupboard. It was filled with handwritten recipe cards. They were Anna's recipes. That night, Clara made a rich beef stew from one of the cards and set the table with a candle. When Ethan walked in, he stopped dead in his tracks. "What is all this?" "Dinner," she said softly. "I found your wife's recipes and thought you might like it." He stared at the table for a long time before slowly taking a seat. After his first bite, he closed his eyes. "It is good," he whispered. "Thank you." The silence that night was different, warmer. For the first time, he helped her clear the table. As he dried the last dish, he spoke. "Your week is nearly over." Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. "I know. But I will keep working hard as long as you will have me." He turned to face her. "Why, Clara? Why stay here? This farm is falling apart. I am falling apart." She looked right at him. "Because you were kind when you did not have to be, and because I think you need someone to stay as much as I need a place to be." He swallowed hard and looked away, his eyes glistening. "All right," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You can stay." Joy flooded through her. "But," he added, "you have to promise me. If things get too hard, you tell me. You do not just run off." She nodded firmly. "I promise." A bit of the weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. "Good. Get some sleep now. More work tomorrow." Clara Wells watched the man walk away. His name was Ethan. She had just thanked him for letting her stay, and his only answer was a small, quiet nod. For an 11-year-old girl with nowhere else to turn, that nod was everything. That night, lying in a strange bed, she thought about the long, hard road that brought her to this place. She remembered her sweet, tired mother, and the aunt in Omaha who looked at her like she was just another problem. Then she thought about Ethan. He was a man hollowed out by grief, but he was still on his feet. Right then, Clara made a decision. She could help him. She could make this broken farm whole again. It was a mighty big dream, but out on that lonely prairie, big dreams were the only kind worth having. That winter came on fast and mean across the Nebraska flatlands. By the middle of December, a deep snow had silenced the world, and the wind cried through the walls of the old barn. Ethan worked from first light until his fingers were numb. He split firewood and mended fences, doing anything to hold the place together. Clara worked right beside him whenever he allowed it. He would often try to send her back to the house. "You will freeze out here," he would say, his voice rough but not mean. She would just shake her head, her hands already holding a shovel or a feed bucket. "I am fine," she would insist. "I can help." And she was a good helper. She shoveled paths through the deep snow. She fed the chickens and gathered their eggs. She even learned how to milk the cow with Ethan standing nearby, giving short, simple directions. Steady pressure, that is it, a little better. With Clara there, the house started to change. Old, clean curtains appeared in the windows. The wood stove stayed warm, and good, simple meals showed up on the table at the proper time. The smell of baking bread began to chase away the stale air of neglect. Ethan noticed all of it. He could not help it. It made him feel unsettled. The house felt alive again, and he found himself listening for the sound of her footsteps. She even started putting his morning coffee beside his plate without being asked, exactly the way his wife Anna used to. It felt like a betrayal and a comfort all at once. One evening, he came inside from a hard day to see Clara kneeling by the fireplace, feeding logs into the flames. She looked up at him and smiled. It was a small, tired, but genuine smile, and it cracked something open deep inside of Ethan's chest. "That is my job," he mumbled, looking away. "You looked cold," Clara said, plain and simple. As he walked by, he let his hand rest on her shoulder for just a moment. "Thank you," he said softly. Later that night, long after she had gone to bed, Ethan sat by the fire, holding a photograph of his wife. "I do not know what I am doing here, Anna," he whispered into the quiet room. "She is just a kid, and I am no good for her." The fire crackled, but the picture offered no advice. Still deep in his chest, something shifted. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it felt like permission. It was permission to start trying again. The days got shorter, and the snow piled higher. And in the heart of that cold winter, the two of them started to build something new. One afternoon, Clara carried a dusty box down from the attic. It was full of old Christmas decorations. "Can we put them up?" she asked him, her voice a little hesitant. Ethan had not celebrated the holiday since Anna died. He had not seen the point. But Clara was watching him with her steady, hopeful eyes, and he found himself nodding. "All right," he said, "but nothing too fancy." Her face lit up. Together they hung garland over the fireplace and put Anna's old ornaments on a small pine tree. The tree was crooked, and the ornaments were chipped, but the way the firelight danced on the glass and the simple joy on Clara's face made his throat feel tight. "It looks all right," he said gruffly. Later that evening, Clara finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air between them for weeks. "Ethan?" she began, her eyes on the shirt she was mending. "Your son, Daniel. What happened between you two?" Ethan's jaw went tight. "That is personal." "I know," she said, looking right at him now. "I am sorry. But you keep his room just so, and you never say his name. I thought maybe it would help to talk." For a long time, Ethan just sat there. Then the words started to come out. "We fought," he said, his voice low. 5 years ago. He wanted to go to college, study engineering. But I needed him here. The farm was failing, and Anna was getting sick. He clenched his hands into fists. "I told him he was selfish for wanting to leave us. He said I cared more about this piece of dirt than I ever cared about him." Ethan's voice cracked. "And when I just stood there too proud to say he was right, he walked away." "Have you heard from him?" Clara asked softly. "One letter, a long time ago. He was in Chicago. I was too angry and too stupid to ever write back." A terrible look crossed Ethan's face. He probably does not even know his mother is gone. "You could still tell him," Clara said. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. "After 5 years? What would I even say to him?" "You could start with the truth," she replied gently. "Tell him you are sorry. Tell him you miss him." "I do not even know where he is," Ethan said, shaking his head. "It is too late. Some things just cannot be fixed." "I do not believe that," she said, standing up. "What does an 11-year-old girl know about it?" he snapped, his own grief making him cruel. Clara stood her ground. "I know my mama died thinking I did not love her because I was too scared to say it. I know I wish every single day I could go back and say the things I did not say." Her voice shook, but it did not break. "You still have a chance, Ethan. Do not waste it." Her words struck him right to the core. He looked at this impossibly brave child and felt 5 years of stubborn pride finally crumble. "I will think about it," he said, his voice hoarse. That was all she needed to hear. Christmas Eve arrived with a soft, quiet snow. The little house was filled with the warm, spicy smell of ginger cookies Clara was baking from one of Anna's old recipe cards. Ethan watched her humming to herself as she worked, a dusting of flour on her cheek. For the first time in a very long time, a real smile touched his lips. "You are good at that," he said. And looking at the life she had brought back into his home, he knew what he had to do. He had to try. He had to find his son. He glanced up, caught off guard. "My mama showed me how. She always said baking was a kind of magic, taking plain things and turning them into something wonderful." Ethan grunted. "Sounds like a smart woman." She was. Clara's smile faded. "I miss her something fierce." "I know you do." They worked in a comfortable quiet after that, with Clara shaping the dough and Ethan pretending to read an old newspaper. After the cookies were done, she set a plate of them on the table. "We ought to save some for Christmas tomorrow," she said. That night, by the soft glow of the tree, Clara was curled up in one of Anna's quilts. Her voice came out sleepy. "Ethan, do you reckon a person can have more than one family? I had my mama, and now I have you. Does that mean I'm forgetting her?" Ethan's throat felt tight. "No, Clara, it don't work like that." "Then how does it work?" He thought about Anna and about his boy Daniel. He thought of how grief and love get tangled up till you can't see where one ends and the other starts. "Love don't push other love out," he said slow. "It just makes more room. Your mama is always going to be with you. But that don't mean you can't care about new folks, too." Clara's eyes opened, full of sleepy thanks. "Thank you for letting me stay, for being my family." His chest ached. "You're welcome." After she drifted off, he gently picked her up and carried her to bed, tucking the quilt around her. He stood in the doorway for a long spell, just watching her. This little girl had come to him with nothing, asking only for a roof and some chores. And somehow, she'd become his. Ethan sat at the small desk in the corner. He pulled out a piece of paper and a pen and just stared at it for a while, then his hand started to move. Daniel, I don't know if you'll ever get this letter, but I have to say these things. I was wrong. About the farm, about you leaving, about everything. You weren't being selfish. You were just a young man with dreams. And I tried to stomp 'em out because I was scared. And I lost you anyway. Your mother passed on 3 years ago. I should have found you. I should have brought you home, and I'm sorry. There's a girl here now. Her name's Clara. She's 11, and she's got more grit than I've had my whole life. She asked why I never wrote to you, and I didn't have a good answer. Just pride and fear. I'm asking you now. If you can forgive a stubborn old man, please come home. Your father, Ethan. He sealed the envelope quick before he could talk himself out of it. He didn't know an exact address, but he knew the name of the construction outfit Daniel worked for. It was a start. He'd ride to town in the morning and mail it. For the first time in a long while, he let himself hope it wasn't too late. Christmas morning was clear and cold, the sun glinting on the snow. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. "Merry Christmas," Ethan said, his voice a low rumble. Her whole face lit up. "Merry Christmas." After breakfast, she handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I made you something," she said, a little shy. "It ain't much." He opened it. Inside was a plain white handkerchief with his initials stitched in the corner. The letters were a little crooked. His throat closed up. "Clara, I know it's simple," she said fast, "but I wanted you to have a gift from me." He turned the cloth over in his big hands, his eyes getting blurry. "It's perfect. Thank you." She beamed. He then reached into his own pocket and pulled out a tiny wooden horse, carved from a scrap piece of lumber. He'd worked on it late at night, trying to remember the whittling skills his own daddy taught him. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "This is for you." Clara's eyes went wide as she took it. She traced the lines with her finger. "You made this? It's a little rough, but I thought you ought to have something." "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I love it." They sat there in the quiet morning light. Outside, the world was frozen solid, but inside that little farmhouse, something warm had started to grow. That afternoon, Ethan rode into Miller's Crossing. The town was mostly shut down for Christmas Day, but the post office was open. The clerk, a tired fella named Fisher, took the letter. "Chicago," Fisher said, squinting at it. "Gonna take a week, maybe more." "That's fine." As Fisher put the letter in the mail slot, Ethan cleared his throat. "You know anyone looking for help? Carpentry? Odd jobs?" Fisher looked him up and down. "You needing work?" "Maybe. Talk to Reverend Marsh. The church roof is leaking and the steps are rotten." Ethan nodded and headed over. The Reverend was an older man with kind eyes. "Ethan Holloway," Marsh said, surprised. "Heard you might need a hand." "I do, but the pay ain't much." "Don't need much," Ethan said. "Just need the work." Reverend Marsh smiled. "All right. Come by next week and we'll talk." As Ethan rode home, he felt something new settle in his chest, a purpose. He had Clara to look after, a church to fix, and maybe, just maybe, a son to bring home. The wind was sharp, but Ethan barely noticed. When he got back to the house, Clara had a whole Christmas dinner laid out. Roasted chicken, potatoes, and carrots. Anna's good dishes were on the table with candles lit right in the middle. "What's all this?" he asked. "It's Christmas," Clara said. "It's supposed to be special." They ate their meal by the warmth of the fire. She told him all about her day, and he just listened, letting her voice fill up the quiet house. For the first time in a long time, it felt like a home. As they stood side by side at the kitchen sink, her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you put that letter in the mail?" Ethan's hands froze in the soapy water. "I sure did. You reckon he'll write me back?" Clara just shook her head, drying a plate with care. "I don't know about that. But you went and did it. That's the part that counts." He looked over at her, this little slip of a girl who showed up with nothing but grit, and felt something warm spread through his chest. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "I did it." Later that night, long after the house had gone quiet, Ethan stared out his window at the fields buried deep in snow. The moon was so bright it turned the whole world silver. He wondered about Daniel, way out in Chicago. Was he reading the letter right now? Or did he just wad it up and toss it in the fire? He thought of Anna, and how she used to stand right here beside him. And he thought of Clara, asleep in the room next door. The future was a big question mark. But for the first time in 5 long years, Ethan Holloway figured tomorrow might just be a day worth waking up for. He finally turned from the window, got into bed, and let the quiet of the prairie night take him. January hit with a cold so bitter it felt personal, like the land itself was trying to shove them back inside for good. The wind found every last crack in the walls, and frost drew pictures on the inside of the windows. Ethan was up before the sun every morning, busting ice out of the water troughs for the stock. His hands were cracked and bleeding, even with the salve Clara made him from beeswax and herbs. "You ought to wear some gloves," she told him one morning, watching him wrap his knuckles in cloth. "Can't get a feel for the work with gloves on," he grumbled. "You won't feel much of anything with frostbite either." He gave her a look, but there was no bite to it. "When did you get to be so bossy?" "About the time you got so stubborn," she said, handing him a hot cup of coffee. Her face was serious. "My mama always said that taking care of yourself is just plain responsible." Ethan took the cup, letting the heat sink into his sore hands. "Your mama was a smart woman." A tiny smile touched Clara's lips before she turned back to the stove. They had fallen into a rhythm. He did the heavy work outside, and she ran the house. In the evenings, he'd read to her by the fire, or she'd tell him stories about her mother. But underneath it all, a single question hung in the air. Every single day, Ethan would watch the mail rider, and every single day, Clara would watch Ethan's face when the rider kept on going. 3 weeks had passed since he sent the letter. Not a word back. Ethan told himself it was what he expected. You couldn't fix 5 years of silence with one piece of paper. Daniel had every right in the world to leave his old man to his regrets. But hope is a hard thing to kill once it takes root. The work on the town church started that next week. Reverend Marsh met him at the building early one Monday. "I appreciate you doing this," the Reverend said, his breath a white cloud in the air. "Most men won't work in this kind of cold." "Most men have more sense," Ethan shot back, but he was already sizing up the job. They struck a deal. Ethan would work 3 days a week, sunup to sundown, for enough money to get them through the winter. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was proof that he could still build things instead of just watching them fall to ruin. Clara was all for it. "It's a good thing," she said that night. "You need to be around folks, not just me." "I got folks." "You got me and a cow that barely puts up with you," she said, her eyes earnest. "I mean real people. That Reverend seems like a decent man." "He is." "Then it's settled," she said, like she was the one in charge. He almost smiled. This time he actually did, shaking his head as he ate his stew. But he knew she was right. Clara hadn't just given him help. She'd given him a reason to look up and see the world again, to step outside the fence line of his own grief. He was starting to feel like a man again, not just some ghost haunting his own house. The church job was brutal in the cold, but Ethan worked with a fire he hadn't felt in years. He tore out the rotted front steps and rebuilt them with solid oak. He patched up the leaky roof. Reverend Marsh worked beside him when he could, the two men finding a quiet comfort in the shared labor. One afternoon, Marsh finally asked the question Ethan knew was coming. "That little girl staying with you, Clara, how did that come to pass?" Ethan kept his eyes on the lumber he was carrying. "She just turned up at my gate one day in November. Said she had no family and no place to go. And you took her in." The Reverend was quiet for a beat. "That was a good thing to do, Ethan." "Wasn't trying to be good," Ethan mumbled. "Just couldn't send a child away. Sometimes those are the same thing." They worked on in silence after that. That Sunday, the Reverend invited them to the service. Ethan's first thought was to say no. He hadn't been inside a church since Anna's funeral. But then he saw the hopeful look on Clara's face. "It might be nice," she said softly. So they went. The little church was drafty, filled with about 20 people, their faces telling stories of hard work and harder luck. Heads turned when they walked in. Ethan felt Clara's small hand find his. "It's all right," he whispered, leading her to the back pew. The sermon was simple, about faith and patience. Ethan listened, but he also watched the other folks. He saw Mrs. Brennan, who'd lost her husband last spring, and old Tom Richter, who was mostly alone in the world. They were all just broken people holding on. After the service, Mrs. Brennan came right over. "What a precious girl," she said to Ethan, holding Clara's hands. "You are blessed." "Yes, ma'am, I am." Old Tom Richter shook his hand. "Heard you were fixing up the place. Good on you. It's good to see you back among the living." On the wagon ride home, Clara was awfully quiet. "What's on your mind?" Ethan asked her. "Those people," she said. "They all seem so lonely." "I suppose most of 'em are. Like you were?" He tightened his grip on the reins. This kid saw right through him. "Yeah, like I was." "But you're not anymore, are you?" He glanced down at her. "No, I'm not." She smiled and leaned her head against his arm. "Good." The letter showed up late one Tuesday. Ethan was in the barn fixing a busted harness when he heard the male rider's horse. He made himself finish his stitch before he walked outside, refusing to let his hopes get too high. The rider handed him one single envelope, postmarked Chicago. Ethan's whole world just stopped. He stood there in the snow, staring at handwriting he hadn't seen in 5 years. Daniel's hand still strong and slanted, just like he remembered. For a long minute, he couldn't even breathe. He finally walked back into the barn and sat down on an old crate, his fingers trembling as he tore open the seal. The note was short. "Father, I got your letter. I've read it more times than I can count. Part of me is still angry. Another part wanted to burn this and pretend it never came. But there's a part of me that still remembers being a boy on that farm, remembers Mama's laugh, remembers you teaching me how to fix a fence. And that part won't let me walk away. I'm sorry about Mama. I wish I had known. We were both wrong about a lot of things. I spent years blaming you. But the truth is, I was just as stubborn. Leaving was easier than staying to fight for us. I'm not ready to say I forgive you. Not yet. But I'm willing to try. I'll be in Miller's Crossing on February 10th. The train gets in around noon. If you want to talk, meet me there. I'll be at the station. If you ain't there, I'll understand. But I hope you are. Daniel." Ethan read the letter 3 times, his eyes burning. Clara found him 20 minutes later, sitting in the cold barn with the letter still clutched in his hand. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice soft with worry. He looked up, his face wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "He wrote back," he said, his voice hoarse. "Daniel wrote back." A huge smile spread across Clara's face. She ran and threw her arms around his neck, and he held on tight. This little girl had believed in second chances when he had given up all hope. "What did he say?" she asked. "He's coming home. February 10th. He wants to talk." "That's wonderful." "He said he ain't ready to forgive me." "But he's willing to try," Clara said, her voice firm. "That's what counts." He wished he had her certainty. But walking back to the house with Clara's hand in his, he felt a flicker of something long gone. He felt like a father. The days before February 10th passed with a heavy slowness. Ethan poured himself into his work, fixing long-neglected things around the farm. He mended the gate with solid hinges, cleaned the barn, and organized his tools with a new purpose. He even drew up plans for a bigger chicken house. Clara saw it all. "You have the jitters," she said one evening. He stopped his pacing. "I am fine." She replied, "You have looked at the calendar 4 times today." He was caught. "I just want to be ready." "Ready for what?" she asked. "For his anger? For him to turn around and leave?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "For it all to go wrong?" Clara put down her mending and looked straight at him. "It might, but it might just go right too. You will not know unless you try." Ethan managed a small smile. You sound like Anna. Good. She sounds like she was a smart woman. She was the sharpest soul I ever met, he said. Then you should trust her, and trust Daniel, and trust yourself. The simple truth in Clara's voice eased a tightness in his chest. He walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, he said softly, for all of it. Clara reached up, her hand covering his. You gave me a home. It is the least I can do. The night before Daniel's arrival, sleep would not come. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the shadows, playing out the next day in his mind. He imagined what he would say, and what Daniel might say back. Around midnight, he gave up and went to the kitchen. Clara was there, a quilt around her shoulders, warming milk on the stove. Cannot sleep either? She asked. Mind working too hard? She poured the warm milk into a mug for him. Do you want to talk on it? Ethan sat down with her. He held the warm mug in his hands. What if he sees me and knows he made a mistake coming back? What if I am too different or not different enough? Clara said, what if he is thinking the very same thing? That stopped Ethan cold. He had been so wrapped up in his own worries he had not considered Daniel's. You reckon he is scared too? He asked. Of course he is. He is returning to a place that holds bad memories to see a father he fought with. It takes a heap of courage to do that. Her voice was soft. But he is coming. That has to mean something. Ethan nodded. Yes, it does. They sat in the comfortable silence of the kitchen. Outside, the world was still and quiet, under a sky full of cold stars. Finally, Clara stood up. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow is a big day. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke. Clara, if this does not go well, I want you to know this is your home, no matter what happens. Her eyes shone in the lamplight. I know, but it will go well. But it will go. I have a good feeling about it. February 10th arrived clear and biting cold. Ethan was up before the sun, unable to be still. He changed his shirt 3 times and stared into Anna's old mirror, trying to see the man his son would see. He saw an old, tired man. The lines of grief and regret ran deep in his face. His hair was more gray than not, but his eyes were no longer empty. Clara had filled them. You look fine, Clara said from the doorway. He jumped. I look like I have been through a storm. You look like a man who has lived, she corrected, smoothing his collar. That is not a bad thing. Daniel will not care how you look. He will care what you say. That is what I am afraid of, Ethan admitted. Then just speak from your heart. And you remember, you are not the same man you were 5 years ago. You are a better one. Ethan's throat felt tight. He gave Clara a quick, strong hug. Thank you, he whispered. Go on now. Go get your son. The ride to Miller's Crossing was just over an hour. Ethan got there early and paced the train platform. A few other townspeople were there, but they kept their distance, sensing his unease. At 5 minutes to noon, the train whistle blew in the distance. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. His palms were slick with sweat. He forced himself to stand still as the locomotive pulled in, hissing steam into the frigid air. The passengers started to get off. An old couple, a mother with 2 little ones, a salesman, and then Daniel. He was taller, broader in the shoulder, but Ethan knew him in an instant. His hair was darker, but his face was thinner. He wore a fine wool coat. He carried 1 bag. His eyes, dark like his mother's, found Ethan right away. For a long moment, they just stood there. The space between them felt as wide as a canyon. Then Daniel took 1 step, then another, until he was just a few feet away. Father, Daniel said. His voice was deeper than Ethan remembered. Son. The word cracked in Ethan's throat. They were two broken men looking for something in each other's faces. Forgiveness, perhaps. "You look different," Daniel finally said. "So do you." Ethan swallowed. "I am glad you came." "I was not sure I would," Daniel admitted, his hand tight on his bag. "But I had to see if there was anything left here." "Is there?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. "I cannot say for sure," Daniel replied. "But I'm here. That is a start." Relief so strong it hurt washed over Ethan. "It is more than I deserve." "Maybe, but Mom would have wanted us to try." At the mention of Anna, a shadow passed over both their faces. That old wound was still fresh. "I should have found you. I should have told you she passed," Ethan said, his voice thick. "That is on me." "I should have come back," Daniel said. "That is on me. We both failed her." "Yes, we did," Ethan agreed. The hard truth hung in the cold air between them. "Tell me about the end," Daniel said. So right there on the platform, Ethan told him everything. He spoke of Anna's sickness, of the long days watching her fade, and of the quiet morning she left them. He told him about the funeral, and the quilt she never finished. Daniel listened, his shoulders shaking. When Ethan was done, Daniel wiped his face. "I'm sorry I was not here." "So am I," Ethan said. After a moment he spoke again. "Come on, let us go home." Daniel paused. "Home?" "If you will have it," Ethan said, his voice full of hope. "There is someone I want you to meet." Daniel looked curious. "Who?" "You will see." The ride back to the farm was quiet. Daniel took in the familiar fields and the distant line of trees. "It has not changed much," he said. "No," Ethan replied. "Still the same patch of stubborn dirt. Still home, though." When they reached the top of the last hill, the farmhouse came into view. Daniel stopped his horse. "The gate," he said, surprised. "You fixed it." "I had a reason to," Ethan said. "We have company now." Just then, the front door opened and Clara stepped onto the porch. Daniel just stared. "Who is that?" "That," Ethan said, "is Clara." Clara watched them ride up, her expression careful. Ethan could see her taking Daniel in, the way a person learns to do when they have had to survive. Daniel got down from his horse, looking from Clara to Ethan, his face a mask of confusion. "Father, who is this?" "Clara has been staying on," Ethan explained as he dismounted. "She needed a place to land, and I needed the help. It has been a good arrangement." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Staying on? As in, living here?" "That is right," Ethan said. Before Daniel could say more, Clara walked down the porch steps to meet them. She stopped a few feet away and gave a proper little nod. "Mr. Holloway, I'm Clara Wells. It's an honor to meet you." The politeness of it, the careful way she stood, it took Ethan right back to that first day she showed up at his gate. He realized she was nervous, worried Daniel wouldn't like her. Daniel's face softened just a little. "Just Daniel is fine. And the honor is all mine, Miss Wells." A small smile touched Clara's lips. Just Clara. They stood there for a long moment before Clara spoke up. "I've made some lunch. Chicken soup and bread. You must be hungry." "I am, actually, thank you." She nodded and headed for the house, glancing back at Ethan for a moment. He gave her a slight nod, and she went inside, leaving the two men alone in the yard. Daniel waited till the door shut. "You want to explain this?" Ethan started unsaddling his horse. "Not much to explain. She turned up with nothing but the clothes on her back. I gave her a place to sleep. She is a good kid." "A good kid?" Daniel's voice was hard and flat. "Dad, she is sleeping in my old room, is not she?" Ethan stopped what he was doing. "Your room has been empty for 5 years. That is not an answer." "Yes, she is in your room." Ethan turned right around to face his son. "You got a problem with that?" Daniel's jaw was tight. I am just trying to figure this out. You would not let me go without a fight, but you just take in some stranger's child? The words hit home because they were true. Ethan took a slow breath. It is not the same thing. How is it not? Because Clara did not have a choice. She was scared and all alone. You had choices, a future. I was trying to protect you, by trapping me, by keeping me here. Ethan's voice cracked. And I was wrong. I know I was. But do not you go punishing Clara for the mistakes I made with you. Daniel looked off toward the barn, his face a storm of emotions. The wind kicked up, rattling the branches of the old cottonwood tree. After a long moment, he said, I'm not punishing anybody. I'm just trying to understand what I'm walking back into. You are walking into a home that is trying to heal. That is all. Daniel gave a slow nod. All right, then. Let's get inside before we both freeze solid. The house was warm, smelling of a rich soup that had been cooking all day. Clara had set the table with Anna's good china, with 3 places set just so. She stood at the stove serving soup into bowls with quick, sure hands. Ethan watched his son take it all in. The clean floors, the new curtains, and the Christmas tree still standing in the corner. Even the photograph of Anna and Daniel was back on the mantelpiece. You have done a lot of work, Daniel said softly. Clara did most of it, Ethan answered. I just tried to stay out of her way. They sat down to eat in a heavy, awkward silence. Clara kept her eyes on her bowl. Daniel ate without thinking, his mind a million miles away. Ethan could not taste a thing. Finally, Clara broke the quiet. Your father talks about you sometimes. Daniel looked up, surprised. He does? He told me you wanted to be an engineer, that you were the smartest fella he knew. Her voice was quiet but sure. He is mighty proud of you, even if he does not say it. Ethan felt his face get hot. He had said those things in quiet moments, never thinking she would repeat them. Daniel's face was impossible to read. Did he tell you why I left? He said you two fought, that he was too stubborn to admit he was wrong. Clara looked him straight in the eye. He said he regretted it every single day. The silence that came after was complete. Ethan just stared at his plate, his heart pounding in his chest. Then Daniel spoke, his voice thick with emotion. I regretted it too. Ethan's head shot up. Their eyes locked across the table, and for the first time in 5 long years, the anger was gone from Daniel's face. All that was left was pain, weariness, and a little flicker of something that looked like hope. Clara stood up from the table. I will clean up. You two should talk. She gathered the dishes and took them to the sink, giving them their space. Daniel walked over to the window, staring out at the cold land. I was so angry when I left, he said at last. Angry at you for not getting it. Angry at myself. Angry at this whole farm for standing between us. Ethan came and stood beside him. I did not know how to let you go. Your mother, she was better at that. She knew that sometimes loving someone means letting them fly. She wrote to me, Daniel said, his voice low. About a year after I left. She told me you missed me, said you were too proud to say it, but you asked about me every day. Ethan's throat went tight. I never knew she wrote. She asked me to come home. Not for you, but for her. Ethan's voice was shaking. We both let her down, son, but beating ourselves up is not going to bring her back. Daniel's shoulders slumped, and Ethan pulled him into a hard embrace. His son, taller and broader now, held on to him like a little boy, and Ethan held on just as tight. I am sorry, Daniel choked out. I am so damn sorry. Me too, son. Me too. They stood there for a good long while, letting go of 5 years of hurt. Clara kept washing dishes at the sink, her quiet presence a comfort. When they finally let go, their eyes were red, but they both looked lighter. Daniel wiped his face. I do not know if I can stay. I've got a job in Chicago. I am not asking you to stay forever, Ethan said quickly. Just be here now. We will figure out the rest later. Daniel nodded. All right, I can do that. Clara turned from the sink, a small smile on her face. There is coffee, and I baked an apple pie yesterday. Daniel managed a real smile. Pie sounds real good. Later that night, long after Clara went to bed, Ethan and Daniel sat by the fire with coffee and pie. The house was peaceful, with just the crackling of the logs burning. She is something else, Daniel said, looking toward the hallway. That girl has had to grow up way too fast. You said she came here in November with nothing. So Ethan told him the whole story, how Clara showed up at the gate barefoot and brave, just asking for work. He told him how she brought the house and him back to life, how she was the one who made him write that letter to Daniel. It was her idea, Ethan confessed. I would not have done it if she had not pushed me. Daniel was quiet for a minute. Then I owe her. We both do. They sat together in a comfortable silence. For the first time in a long time, it felt right having his son home. The hurt was still there, but they were talking. They were trying. So what's the plan? Daniel asked, looking out the window. For Clara, I mean. Is she here to stay? I sure hope so, if she wants to. Daniel turned from the window. And on paper? Have you thought about that? Ethan looked confused. What are you getting at? Adoption? Making it legal? Daniel put his coffee down. Well, right now, any long-lost relative could just show up and take her. You wouldn't have a leg to stand on. A cold fear gripped Ethan. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Daniel was right. Clara was safe, but she wasn't truly his in the eyes of the law. I wouldn't even know where to start, Ethan admitted. I know some folks in Chicago, a few lawyers. I could ask around for you. Daniel's tone was cautious. Only if that's what you want. Ethan met his son's gaze. She's family. She ought to be protected like family. Daniel gave a slow nod, a warmth in his eyes. All right, then. We'll figure it out together. The days fell into a steady rhythm. Daniel fit back into the house easier than expected, handling the heavy work without a word. He and Ethan fixed a stretch of fence that had given way under the winter ice. Clara would watch them, and Ethan saw the simple joy on her face as they slowly found their way back to each other. But Daniel still kept a part of himself closed off, fighting battles Ethan couldn't see. It was a familiar pattern, the same one Ethan had used to survive after Anna passed. One afternoon, with Ethan in town for supplies, Clara found Daniel sitting on a hay bale in the barn, just staring into space. Are you all right? She asked gently. Daniel jumped a little. Yeah, just thinking about your mother. He looked around the dusty barn. I spent half my childhood in here learning from my dad. Mom would bring us sandwiches and sit right there while we ate. His voice got heavy. I can still picture her standing in that doorway, smiling. Clara sat down next to him. Tell me about her. And so he did. Daniel spoke of Anna's gentle nature and her quiet resolve. He told Clara how she taught him to read with books from the little library in Miller's Crossing. He explained how she always took his side against Ethan, but then later she would help them both understand the other's point of view. She had a way of making this hard life feel like a grand adventure. Clara listened, hanging on every word. When he was done, she said softly, "She sounds like a wonderful woman. I wish I'd known her." She would have loved you, Daniel said with a faint smile. She always wanted a daughter. My own mama wanted more children too, Clara said, her gaze turning inward. But she just had me. I think that's why she held on so tight. I was all she had. Do you think she knew you loved her before she passed? I hope she did. Clara's voice trembled. I told her, but I'm not sure she could hear me. Daniel hesitantly put an arm around her. Oh, she heard, he said. Mothers always hear that. They sat in the quiet, two souls connected by a shared sorrow, finding comfort in the silence. When Ethan came back and saw them sitting together, a sense of rightness settled over him. This was what he had been hoping for. Not just making peace with Daniel, but building something new, a family chosen by heart. That night, Daniel cleared his throat at the dinner table. I've got to head back to Chicago next week. I have a job, responsibilities I can't just walk away from. Clara's face fell, and Ethan felt his own stomach tighten. But, Daniel went on, looking from his father to Clara, I'm not leaving for good. I'm going to settle my affairs, give my notice, and pack my things. Then I'm coming back, if y'all will have me. For a moment, Ethan was too stunned to speak. Clara found her voice first. You really mean it? You're coming home to stay? I mean it, Daniel said, his voice solid. Chicago was never home. It was just a place I ran to. And I'm done running. What about your engineering work? Ethan asked. I can find work in Nebraska. The railroads, irrigation projects, there's always something. Daniel looked straight at his father. But even if I can't, I'd rather be here, with you and with Clara, trying to make a go of it. Ethan walked across the small room and pulled his son into a fierce hug. Welcome home, son. Daniel held on just as tight. It's good to be back. Clara wrapped her arms around both of them, and for a long moment the three of them stood as one. The week flew by. Daniel and Ethan fell into an easy partnership, fixing things around the farm and planning for the spring planting. They talked more than they had in years, carefully mending the old fences between them. On Daniel's last night, they had a special meal. Clara roasted a chicken and made biscuits with the last jar of preserves Anna had canned. They ate with a comfortable quiet, enjoying the food and the moment. I was thinking, Daniel said as they ate dessert, about what we talked about. About making things official for Clara. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and worry. I wrote to that lawyer friend of mine in Chicago, Daniel said. He told me we could petition for guardianship. It'll be a pile of paperwork and take some time, but he said it's doable. Ethan turned to the girl. Is that something you would want, Clara? To stay here for good? To really be a part of this family? Tears welled up in her eyes. But I'm not really yours. You are ours, Ethan said with a sudden fire. You've been ours since you walked up to that gate. This just makes the government see it too. What if my aunt comes back? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Or someone else. Then we'll fight, Daniel said plainly. Your family. We protect our own. Clara broke then, covering her face and sobbing. Ethan knelt by her chair. Clara, look at me. She lowered her hands. You saved my life, Ethan told her, his own voice thick with emotion. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning. You brought my son back to me. You made this place a home again. So yes, we want to make it official. We want you to be ours, and we want to be yours. If you'll have us. With a cry, Clara threw her arms around his neck and held on with all her might. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, I want that. Ethan held her close as Daniel put a hand on both their shoulders, completing the circle. The next morning, they took Daniel to the train station. He hugged Clara first. You take care of him for me. Don't let him be too stubborn. She gave a watery smile. I won't. Then he turned to Ethan. I'll be back in 3 weeks. 4 at the most. We'll be here. They embraced, a lifetime of unspoken words passing between them. Thank you, Daniel said, for giving me a second chance. Thank you for taking it, the conductor called out. Daniel grabbed his bag and got on the train. He found a seat by the window and raised a hand as it started to move. Ethan and Clara waved until the train was just a speck in the distance. The ride home was quiet. Clara leaned against Ethan and he kept his arm around her. He'll be back, she said with certainty. I know he will. I believe you, Ethan replied. And for the first time in 5 long years, he truly did. He believed in tomorrow and in second chances. He believed that broken things could be made whole again with enough care. When they got back to the farm, he guided the horse through the open gate. Together they walked toward the house, their home. A home that would soon be complete. That evening, as Ethan sat by the fire, he looked at the old photograph of Anna on the mantel. I think you'd be pleased with all this, he whispered, with Clara and with Daniel coming home. The photograph didn't answer, but a deep peace settled in his heart. Outside, the world was still and cold, but somewhere out there, his son was packing up an old life to start a new one. Spring was still a ways off, but Ethan could feel the promise of it in the air. He had been given a gift he never thought he'd have again, a son who had forgiven him, and a daughter who had chosen him. Ethan Holloway knew he couldn't waste a single moment of it. He stoked the fire one last time and headed for bed. There was work to be done tomorrow, fences to mend, and plans to make for the future. But tonight, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Ethan slept soundly, knowing his house and his heart were no longer empty. He had not just given her a job, he had given her a home, and she had given him his life back. The 3 weeks Daniel promised turned into almost 5. February bled into March, bringing the first signs of spring. The days got longer and the snow started to melt, showing patches of frozen ground. Ethan tried not to let the worry get to him. Daniel had written twice, explaining delays with work and his apartment lease in Chicago. The letters were warm and full of plans, but with each day that passed, an old fear tightened in Ethan's chest. Clara saw it, of course. She always did. "He is coming back," she said one morning, finding Ethan at the window watching the road again. "You have got to trust him." "I do trust him." "Then stop staring at that road like it is going to make him get here faster." She put a plate of eggs down in front of him. "Eat. We have got chores to do." And they did. Life on the farm had to go on. Ethan picked up more repair jobs in town, helping folks fix barns and porches. The money was not much, but it was steady, enough for seed and supplies. Clara was more than just a helper now. She ran the house with a quiet confidence. But the guardianship papers sat on Ethan's desk, a reminder of how shaky it all was. One afternoon, Reverend Marsh's wagon rolled up the drive. "Ethan, you got a minute?" the Reverend called out. Ethan stuck his axe in a log. "Always, Reverend. What is on your mind?" Marsh climbed down, his face full of trouble. "Had a woman in town this morning, from Omaha. Said she was looking for her niece." A cold feeling spread through Ethan's chest. What did she look like? Thin woman, hard face. Asked if anyone had seen a girl, about 11 or 12, dark hair, traveling by herself. The Reverend looked Ethan in the eye. I kept my mouth shut, but who knows about the others? Clara's aunt. Ethan's hands balled into fists. She did not want Clara then. What does she want now? Do not know. But you need to be careful. If she has got a legal claim, she ain't got a damn thing. Ethan's voice was like stone. She abandoned that girl. Threw her away. I believe you, but the law can see things different. Marsh put a hand on his shoulder. Get those guardianship papers filed. And do it soon. As soon as the Reverend left, Ethan went to find Clara. She was in the chicken coop, humming as she scattered feed. She looked up and her smile disappeared when she saw his face. What is wrong? He told her about the woman in town. He watched her face turn pale as he said, "She is here, in Miller's Crossing, looking for you." Clara's hands started to shake. She dropped the feed pail, and hugged herself tight. "I ain't going back," she whispered. Ethan knelt down and took her small, cold hands. "You won't have to. I give you my word." His voice was iron. "If she thinks she has rights, we'll fight her. We'll get a lawyer and do whatever it takes. This is your home now, Clara." Tears streamed down her face. "But what if you can't stop her?" He pulled her close. "Then I'll track you down and bring you right back here. It's my turn to save you, remember?" He held her while she cried, his mind already set on a plan. He had to get a letter to his son, Daniel, and he had to do it now. Before sunrise, he was on his horse, riding hard for town. 2 days later, a hired wagon pulled up. A woman in her 40s, wearing city clothes that screamed she didn't belong, stepped out. She studied the farmhouse like she was planning to buy it or burn it down. Ethan had already told Clara to stay inside. He walked out to the gate to meet the woman head-on. "Can I help you?" he asked. Her eyes sized him up with pure contempt. "I'm searching for my niece, Clara Wells." "And who might you be?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "I'm her aunt, Margaret Wells. I have a legal claim to that child." Ethan looked her square in the eye. "A claim you didn't seem too concerned with when you threw her out on her own." Margaret's face went hard. "I had my reasons. She belongs with her family." "She belongs where she's safe," Ethan countered. "That little girl wandered for weeks, scared and half-starved before she stumbled onto my land. You didn't just fail to keep her safe, ma'am. You didn't keep her at all." "I want to see her now," she demanded. "No," Ethan said flatly. "You're not seeing her, and you're not taking her." The woman's face twisted with rage. "I'll have the sheriff here by sundown." "Then you go right ahead," Ethan said, stepping closer. "And you can explain to him why you only want her now that someone else is doing the work of raising her. What changed, Margaret? Why the sudden interest?" "She's my blood." "Blood don't mean a thing if you don't act like kin," Ethan said, his voice hard as rock. "Now you best be on your way." Margaret glared at him. "This isn't finished." With that, she turned and left in a cloud of dust. When he turned back, Clara was on the porch, pale as a ghost. "You heard?" She just nodded. "I meant every word," he told her. "She's not getting you." As he led her inside, she asked the question that hung in the air. "Why now? Why does she want me now?" That night, Ethan explained the whole mess to Reverend Marsh. The Reverend listened without saying a word, his expression serious. The Reverend was clear. "You need people to speak for what you've done for Clara. And you need to file for guardianship first thing in the morning. File what you have. It shows the court you mean business." Marsh didn't stop there. "I'll ride to the county seat with you. We'll see Judge Morrison together." The next day, after leaving Clara with their neighbor, Mrs. Brennan, they made the long journey. Judge Morrison was a man in his 60s who looked like he had heard every story twice. He listened patiently as Ethan laid out the facts. "Do you have proof the aunt abandoned her?" the judge finally asked. "Only Clara's word," Ethan admitted. "And the state she was in when I found her." The judge frowned. "Courts tend to side with blood relatives, son. Sending an 11-year-old off alone is neglect in my book, but you'll need to prove it." He looked at the papers Ethan had. "This is a start, but you need written statements from witnesses, and you need a lawyer. This is liable to get messy." Ethan's heart sank. "I don't have money for a lawyer." The judge nodded grimly. "Well, you best find some." On the long ride home, the cost weighed heavy on Ethan's mind. The farm just didn't bring in that kind of money. As if reading his thoughts, Reverend Marsh spoke up. "I know a lawyer in Lincoln. Does work for folks who can't pay. Let me write to him." When Ethan got back to Mrs. Brennan's, Clara was waiting anxiously. "What did the judge say?" she asked, her eyes wide. Ethan took her hands. "He said we've got a fight on our hands." "But what if we lose?" she whispered. He met her gaze. "I made you a promise. You are staying here, no matter what." Mrs. Brennan put a hand on her shoulder. "You believe him, child." 3 days later, a wagon pulled up fast. It was Daniel. "I got your letter and came as fast as I could," he said, jumping down. Relief washed over Ethan. His son was here. Daniel went straight for the house, where Clara ran out to meet him. He swept her into a huge hug. "It's all right," he said softly. "I'm here, and I brought help." A young man in a suit stepped out of the wagon. "This is Thomas Whitmore," Daniel explained. "He's a lawyer. He's here to make sure you stay put." Whitmore didn't waste a minute. For 2 solid days, he talked to everyone in town, writing down every detail about how Clara had arrived and how she was thriving. So, when Margaret Wells showed up 5 days later with the county sheriff, they were ready. The sheriff looked uneasy. "Mr. Holloway," he started, "I have papers here to collect the child." Ethan didn't move an inch. "That's not going to happen, Sheriff." Just then, Whitmore stepped forward, calm as you please, and handed the sheriff a stack of papers. "My client," he said, "has already filed for legal guardianship. This matter will be settled by a judge in 2 weeks. Until then, the girl stays in the custody of Mr. Holloway." The deputy looked at the papers, then at the woman, Margaret. "Ma'am, this is a court order." "That is crazy," she snapped. "I am her aunt. I have rights." "Mr. Holloway is her legal guardian until the hearing," the deputy said calmly. Margaret's face turned red with rage. "She is my niece." "A niece you threw away," a voice cut in. A young man stepped forward. "You sent her packing when she had nobody else." "Who are you?" Margaret demanded. "Daniel Holloway, Ethan's son. And I will be at that hearing to tell the judge exactly the kind of loving home Clara has right here." Margaret sneered. "You do not know that girl. She is difficult. She will turn on you." "That is a lie," a clear voice said from the porch. Clara walked toward them, her head held high. "I was never the trouble. You just never thought I was worth your time. Effort to you." Margaret's face changed from surprise to just plain mean. But Clara kept on talking, her voice shaking just a little bit. "You said I was too much trouble and cost too much. You had your own life to live, and I just did not fit in it." Tears ran down her face, but her words were strong. "So I left, because I knew I was not wanted. But now I have found people who do want me, who picked me, and I am not about to leave them." A heavy silence fell over the yard. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Ma'am, it looks like this here is a legal matter now. I suggest you get yourself a lawyer and take it to the judge." Margaret's jaw was tight with anger. "Fine," she snapped. "I will see you in court." She gave Clara a cold look. "And you will remember that you chose strangers over your own family." "They are not strangers," Clara said quietly. "They are my family." Margaret turned and stomped back to her wagon. The sheriff tipped his hat to Ethan, looking sorry for the whole mess before he followed. The moment they were gone, Clara just fell apart. She buried her face in Ethan's arms and cried, while Daniel and Whitmore stood nearby, like they were guarding a fort. Those 2 weeks before the court date were the longest weeks of Ethan's whole life. Whitmore got them ready, asking them every question he could think of, preparing for whatever Margaret's lawyer might throw at them. Clara was scared to death that what she had to say would not be enough. "Just tell the plain and simple truth," Whitmore coached her. "That is all you have to do. Tell the judge what your aunt did and what your life is like now." On the day of the hearing, they all rode out to the county seat. Ethan, Daniel, Clara, and Whitmore went together with Reverend Marsh and Mrs. Brennan right behind them to be witnesses. The courtroom was a small, serious room with wooden benches. Judge Morrison sat behind a big desk, and you could not read a thing on his face. Margaret sat with her lawyer, a slick-looking fella named Garrison, who looked like he was full of fake pity. On the other side sat Ethan, Daniel, and Clara, with Whitmore right there with them. Judge Morrison called the room to order. "We are here to figure out who will be the guardian of Clara Wells," he said. "Mrs. Margaret Wells, her aunt, is asking for custody. Mr. Ethan Holloway is also asking to be her legal guardian." Garrison went first. He told a story about a sad aunt who had to make hard choices, but was now ready to take care of her niece. He made it sound like Ethan was just some stranger who had taken advantage of a helpless child. Then Whitmore calmly took his turn. He presented Clara's story about being abandoned. He had statements from folks in town who saw it all. He called Reverend Marsh to talk about Ethan's good character and how well he cared for Clara. He even had papers to prove Ethan could provide for her. Then it was Clara's turn. She looked like a scared little bird in that big witness chair, but her eyes were steady. Mr. Whitmore asked her gentle questions about her mama's passing and her time with her Aunt Margaret. He asked, "Did your aunt ever harm you?" Clara's voice was just a whisper. "No, sir, but she sent me away. She said I cost too much to feed and she had her own life to live." Whitmore's voice was kind. "So what did you do, Clara?" "I just started walking, sir. I walked for weeks until I found Mr. Holloway's farm." "Why not go to the law or a church?" Clara looked down at her little hands. "I was afraid they'd just send me right back to her. I just wanted to find a place I could earn my keep." Then she looked right at Ethan in the crowd. "And I did. I found a home." When the other lawyer started in on her, trying to make her sound like a liar, she just answered his mean questions with the simple truth. Finally, Judge Morrison called on Ethan. Ethan told the court plainly how Clara had shown up, how skinny and worn out she was, and the good work they'd done together on the farm. He spoke of how she had brought light back into his house, and if he was honest, back into his life. The judge looked him square in the eye. "Mr. Holloway, do you love this child?" Ethan felt his throat tighten up. "Yes, sir. I love her like she was my own flesh and blood. And if I give you guardianship, what kind of life can you give her?" "An honest one," Ethan said. "A safe one. She'll have a roof over her head, a good education, and a family that will always protect her. And when she is a grown woman, then she'll make her own way. She can stay or go, but our door will always be open. She will always have a home with us." Judge Morrison sat there for a long moment, just looking at Ethan. Then he turned his gaze on Margaret. "Mrs. Wells, I have just one question for you. You sent this child away months ago. Why do you want her back now?" Margaret stood up straight, her face a hard mask. "She is my sister's daughter. My blood." The judge shook his head. "That is not what I asked you. Why now?" You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. Finally, Margaret's face started to crumble. "Because I heard she found a good home with a man who has land. And I thought—" She trailed off, knowing she had said too much. The judge's voice turned to ice. "You thought you could profit from this arrangement, Mrs. Wells? This court is not here to help you line your pockets." His voice was cold as a Texas norther. "Based on everything I have heard today, it is clear to me that you abandoned this child. She has since found a stable and loving home with Mr. Holloway." He looked over at Clara with a kind smile. "Young lady, you have shown great courage. In the eyes of the law, the child's best interest is what matters most." Judge Morrison brought his gavel down hard. "I am granting full legal guardianship to Ethan Holloway, Mrs. Wells. Your petition is denied." A quiet buzz went through the room. The color drained from Margaret's face, but her lawyer knew they were beat and was already pulling her toward the door. Clara just broke down crying, and Ethan wrapped his big arms around her. Daniel joined the hug, making a little circle of their new family. As they were getting ready to head home, Margaret came up to them one last time. "You made a bad choice," she said to Clara, her voice full of venom. "He will disappoint you. They always do." Clara looked at the woman who was her own kin, but knew nothing about family and felt only a sad pity. "No," Clara said softly. "I found where I belong. I am sorry you cannot be happy for me." Margaret just turned and walked away. As the prairie turned from dusty brown to a hopeful green that spring, Ethan, Daniel, and Clara worked the land as a team. Daniel even got a good paying job with the railroad surveying nearby. The official papers came in the mail one evening in early May. They celebrated that night with a special supper of roast beef and potatoes, and a surprise cake that Clara had baked herself. Daniel raised his glass. "To family." Ethan smiled. "To second chances." And Clara, her eyes shining bright, finished with, "To home." They talked late into the night, making plans for the farm and for Clara's schooling. Daniel was fixing to teach her math, and Ethan wanted to teach her the ways of the land. Clara just wanted to keep her egg business going and maybe sell her baked goods in town. Later, as Clara dozed by the fire, Ethan looked at his son. "Your mother would be so proud of us," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. "She would be. especially of you, Pa. I did not do it by myself. No, Daniel said. But you did the hardest part. You opened the gate. Ethan remembered that cold November morning when Clara had stumbled up to his farm, barefoot and looking for nothing more than a chance to work. He had come so close to sending her away, to letting his own sorrow keep his world shut tight. But he did not. And that single choice, that one moment of grace, had changed everything. Summer brought long days of hard work, but it was good work, filled with laughter. The farm started to come back to life. Clara grew taller, and her confidence bloomed right alongside the prairie wildflowers. She started school in town and made friends easy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the big Texas sky, Clara asked, "Ethan, when I am all grown up, will I have to leave here?" Ethan looked at the girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Now, why would you have to leave?" "Because that is what children do. They go off and find their own way." "Well, that is true," he said. "But they also come back home if they have a reason to." "Will I have a reason?" Ethan put his arm around her. "I sure hope so. But whether you stay right here or wander the whole wide world, this will always be your home, Clara. Always." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the last bit of sun disappear. A year after Clara showed up, Ethan stood at that same gate. The fields were green, the barn was strong, and the house had a fresh coat of paint. But it was the sounds that got to him. The sound of laughter from the kitchen, where Clara and Daniel were playfully arguing. The sounds of a farm that was alive again. He had lost so much in his life, but he had gained something back too. He had a daughter, a family made whole again, and a reason to greet the dawn. The gate stood open, just like it had on that long-ago November day. Ethan thought about shutting it for the night, but he stopped. He decided to leave it open. Because you just never know when somebody lost might be wandering down your road, looking for a safe place to land. Someone brave enough to ask a simple question that could change your whole world. Clara had asked for work. In return, Ethan had given her a family, and she had given him back his life.